Hello and Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Anizalika Damia. Today we will talking about gravimetric analysis. These are my team members. So what are gravimetric analysis? Gravimetric analysis is a quantitative method that is in chemistry. These methods will help to determine the amount of substance that called the analyte in a sample. It works by convert the analytes into a product whose mass can be measured accurately. There are four main types of gravimetric analysis. First, precipitation method. Second, volatilization method. Third, electrogravimetry and thermogravimetry. There are several general steps that involve in gravimetric analysis. First, sample preparation. We need to start by dissolving the analyte in a suitable solvent with suitable pH, concentration, volume, and temperature. Next, precipitation of precipitates, which when a reagent is added to form an insoluble solid with the analyte. Next, digestion is when the mixture allowed to stand so that the particles grow bigger and easy to filter. Next, filtration and washing. The precipitate need to filter by using filter paper and wash to remove impurities. Last but not least, drying or ignition. The precipitate is made to dry or heated to remove moisture or convert it into the weighing form. Some precipitate must be ignited to decompose solid and form a compound of stable and non-composition. Lastly, weighing. We weigh the solid and calculate the amount of analyte using two methods, which are chemical factor and gravimetric factor.
Next is the theory. So what is precipitation in gravimetric analysis? So precipitation is a process where solid form from a solution due to a chemical reaction. In gravimetric analysis, we use this to separate and measure a specific component of a substance. And for this to work properly, the precipitate or the solid form must be pure, stable, and easy to filter and weigh. So how precipitation form in analysis? So the general steps include by adding a reagent that react with the target analyte, forming a solid compound that is insoluble, and then we filter, dry, and weigh to find out how much of a substance was in the solution. In this case, we are analyzing nickel to chloride using this technique. A chemical reagent used called dimethyl-glyoxime or DMG. So when DMG was added to a solution containing nickel ions, a red solid precipitate will form that called nickel dimethyl-glyoximate. So this reaction is very specific to nickel, which makes it perfect for an accurate analysis. So once the red solid precipitate collected and weighed, we can calculate exactly how much nickel to chloride was in the original sample. So the reaction happening was shown in the chemical equation below, which nickel ions in the solution react with dimethyl-glyoxime with the presence of hydroxide ion. This form a red solid precipitate, which is nickel dimethyl-glyoximate, and water as a byproduct.
Next, we move on to methodology. For this experiment, the gravimetric method was used to determine the amount of nickel chloride in a sample by forming a solid nickel complex that we could isolate and weigh. First, analytical balance was used to weigh the sample. It was then diluted in a beaker and 5 ml of 6 ml hydrochloric acid was added. After that, the solution was then heated to 70 to 80 degrees Celsius. While heating, about 35 to 40 ml of 1% dimethylglyoxime was added. Next, diluted ammonia solution was slowly added until the red precipitate formed. This is the nickel DMG complex. The mixture was then placed in a steam bath for 20 to 30 minutes to allow complete precipitation. After heating, the precipitate was left to cool at room temperature for 1 hour. The precipitate was then filtered and was washed with distilled water to remove impurities. The filtrate was then tested using silver nitrate to ensure no chloride ions were left, meaning the filtrate should be colorless if the precipitation is complete. Finally, the solid was dried in an oven for 45 to 55 minutes, then cooled and weighed again to determine the final mass of precipitate. Next, we move on to example. From the weighing process, the mass of the glass plus precipitate was 25.3173 grams. The mass of the glass alone was 24.7423 grams, so the mass of the nickel DMG precipitate was 25.317 grams minus 24.7423 grams is equals to 0.5750 grams. The gravimetric factor was used for nickel in the complex, which is 0.2042. So the mass of nickel was 0.5754 grams times with 0.2042 equals to 0.1174 grams of nickel. The original sample weighed 0.5357 grams, so the percentage of nickel in the sample was 0.1174 grams divided by 0.5357 grams times 100 is equals to 21.9%. This shows that the gravimetric method is effective and accurate in determining the nickel content in the sample.
So now let's end the presentation with a conclusion. So what we can conclude from this experiment is that the objective was to determine the nickel 2 chloride content by precipitating nickel ions in the form of diamondic oxygenate. So what method was used in this experiment? The method used is the gravimetric method in quantifying the nickel 2 chloride. So gravimetry is considered as a quantitative analysis where substance is measured in its true and pure form after going through a separation process. So precipitation is actually a common and frequently used method in qualitative analysis application or practice. From what we can see from the value obtained is that the value of the yielded nickel content obtained is slightly off from the theoretical value. So this happens when we were doing calculation. So based on the calculation result, it shows that the nickel content found in this sample is lower than the known value. So we assume this happens because of unfinished filtration, or another possible cause is that imperfect washing. That's all from us. Thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye.